our Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, let's start with that headline. Mike Matthews seems to have narrowed down his over 30 offers to just a final couple. So how are you feeling about where those 4 schools sit as the 5-star gets ready for, looks like a busy month of June?
Well, he's frequented several of those campuses. He's been to Clemson several times, been over to nearby Georgia a handful of times as well. And then I feel like he's been to every major recruiting weekend at Tennessee since his process has taken off. And I think that through the course of his recruitment early on, you would have said Clemson was in great position for sure. Alabama was a school he was high on. There was Michigan and Notre Dame. But I think that Tennessee and USC are kind of 2 programs that have really taken off with him since last summer. He got a chance to go out to USC for the first time, going back for his official visit. Loved his time with Lincoln Riley. Loves that offense. Loves what receivers have done under Coach Riley. They're excited to get back out there. But Tennessee, the trajectory of the program under Coach Heupel and company, the way that he's clicked with Coach Pope and that coaching staff, being there for the win over Alabama, getting back for a big recruiting weekend in the winter/spring, and then coming back again for his official visit. I think that Tennessee's a program to keep an eye on with Mike Matthews as they start to build on this class that's ranked in the top 10 nationally. Offensive skill is really taking a priority here heading into the summer. They're trending for maybe the fastest running back in the country, Peyton Lewis. Brian Doan and I forecasted the balls for him, and we'll see if they trend for Mike Matthews coming out of these official visits. I could see this one still going a few different ways.
Staying with 5-star wide receivers, Steve, Cameron Coleman is down to a few, and a few schools that are really standing out to him: A&M, Florida State, Clemson, Auburn, many others still after his signature. What's the latest in his process with a couple visits next month?
Yeah, similar to Mike Matthews, I think that we'll have more clarity on where things stand with Cam Coleman coming out of these official visits. I think he could see himself at several schools. Obviously, in-state Auburn's done a terrific job with Marcus Davis and Hugh Freeze. He went to Auburn spring game, been to campus several times, loves the way that offense is coming together under this new staff and Coach Freeze. And look, Florida State's done a fabulous job recruiting Cam Coleman. They have a top 10 recruiting class right now. He loves Mike Norvell, loves Coach Dugans and the way that he develops receivers and the way that program's developing. He says he's going to get back to Florida State soon. And then Texas A&M's a place he's been several times as well, Blair, including the Aggie spring game. And similar to Auburn, with Coach Petrino being there at A&M now, he thinks that offense is on the uptick there, and his relationship with the staff and the vibe on campus are things that he really likes. Clemson's getting an official visit on June 2nd. He likes the Garrett Riley additions, built a great relationship with Coach Grisham. And again, similar to Mike Matthews and his family, they just love the vibe at Clemson. Normally when a recruit puts Clemson in their finalists, a lot of it has to do with just the culture and their overall feel when they're on campus, and he feels it too. LSU's going to try and make a move there with an official visit in June. He got a chance to visit with the 7-on-7 team, which included quarterback commit Colin Hurley, who's headed to the Tigers. He liked his conversation with Cortez Hankton. He's looking forward to getting back there for more. And a team that could really make a move with him moving forward is Georgia. He was there last weekend. He says he'll absolutely be back again. Loves the pro-style offense and the way they develop their players across the board. Spent time with Kirby Smart and the entire staff. And so Georgia's a program that could be arrow up with Mr. Coleman as well.
The vibes are certainly good at Georgia this week. It could be a big weekend, though, for Oregon. Let's go to the other side of the country. Is both quarterback Michael Van Buren and 4-star defensive lineman Zadavian Sims both set to make their college decision on Saturday. You can watch Sims's commitment right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. That's Saturday at 4:45. We'll continue to tell you more about this as the show goes along. But, Steve, how are you feeling about where Oregon sits with these 2 priority targets?
Well, my crystal ball is on the Ducks for both Van Buren and Sims. I like where Oregon stands going into the weekend. For Van Buren, I'd be very surprised if he ended up elsewhere. His other 2 finalists are Penn State and Maryland, and we've seen those 2 schools kind of move on to other passers in this class. Look, Van Buren visited Oregon for the first time in September, where he was offered in person, saw the Ducks win a big game. He's been back a couple times since. The first time he was there, he talked about the atmosphere and Coach Lanning building something special. And then the second time he talked about the player development and how Oregon wants to see their players develop on and off the field. I think he likes the scheme fit, the way that Bo Nix was utilized. Coach Will Stein and what he did at UTSA speaks to him. And Oregon's need at the position is big for Van Buren as well. They already have Luke Moga committed at the position, but Van Buren gives them another player with a different kind of style. And so Oregon needing to add to that quarterback room with Bo Nix exhausting his eligibility after the season. I like where they stand with Michael Van Buren. And then with Sims, this is a recruitment that's had some ebbs and flows. There was a time where I liked Michigan State. Right now, I like Oregon. He visited earlier. He visited in April, liked it so much he came back the next week so his mom could take a look at it, and called Dan Lanning one of a kind. Likes the defensive staff. He even talked about Dan Lanning having the largest college buyout in college football. So he says he's there for all the right reasons, but loves the scheme, loves Coach Lupoy and his track record. Oklahoma is the other program in there, right, that you got to keep a keen eye on, keep in state there. So Oregon trying to hold off the Sooners down the stretch. But as we record right now, I definitely like where Oregon stands for Sims as they try and add to this recruiting class that ranks number 7 nationally. And this is a guy that he's at the top of their board on the defensive line. There's not a player that we're recruiting harder up front than is Davian Sims.
Steve, I think this is what we envisioned, right? When Dan Lanning took over for Mario Cristobal and they were looking for that replacement in a way, kind of on a whim when Mario left for Miami. And this gives the Ducks a nice little runway heading into the summer to build some momentum as they try to make a run for a top 5 finish nationally. There's players like Dakota Field, Jaquan McRoy, Justin McWilliams. They have 8 commitments or commitments from 8 different states already. You mentioned them being 7th in the team recruiting rankings, but what's the ceiling for Oregon's 2024 recruiting class?
Yeah, it was so much like Mario Cristobal, who was an ace recruiter for Nick Saban at Alabama, and then obviously did a fantastic job at Oregon. Dan Lanning was a big part of some monster recruiting wins at Georgia, like Nakobe Dean, and that was part of his DNA and why Oregon hired him. In addition to being one of the best coordinators in college football, he was one of the best recruiters in college football, and he loves that aspect of it, of building genuine relationships with top targets. And Oregon also has a big plan of how they wanted to turn this program into a championship caliber program again. And as they move forward, receiver remains a major position of need for Oregon. And another prospect that's going to be announcing their college decision on the 24/7 Sports platform, this channel right here, so hit those like buttons, is Dylan Gresham, one of the most prolific receivers out west. I think Blair, he led your state in yards, 2,051 yards, 31 touchdowns. He's going to announce his college decision on Monday. I've liked where Oregon has stood for him for a while. And if they could add him to Jordan Anderson and Tyseer Denmark, that would be one of the better receiver hauls in the country. They'll be all in on Jeremiah McClellan moving forward as they battle Ohio State. I think they're in the top 2 for McClellan. But coming on the heels of adding Dickey and Kozar, Oregon is close to having as dynamic a receiver room as anybody in the country, and Gresham would be a big part of that. As you mentioned, I like where they stand with Justin Williams. I have Oregon crystal ball for him. He's a guy that's going to be a riser in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings that are updating next week. Andrew Ivins and his team, Cooper Patagna, Gate Brooks, Chris Singletary love Justin Williams, and so does Oregon, and I love Oregon's position there. They're battling Notre Dame and Tennessee, among others, for Elijah Rushing, but I think they're near the top for him. Another young man I have crystal ball to Oregon is Dakota Fields out of Gardena Serra, California. He also has official visits to USC in Miami, but I think coming out of a recent visit to Oregon, the Ducks are the one to beat, and they're going to get the last official from him in June. If they can add Dakota Fields to Ife Obedegwu and Aaron Flowers, that makes for a terrific secondary haul as they swing for another player like Aaron Scott moving forward. And then Jaquan McRoy, he's one of the most coveted offensive linemen in the country. He's our number 3 offensive tackle in America out of the state of Alabama. It's going to be tough to pull him out of SEC country, but as things stand right now, I think Oregon's the team to beat for him. And if they can pair McRoy with Fox Crater, another high upside offensive tackle, that'd be a hell of a bookend for any program in college football.
Man, Steve Wiltfong just doing it all, rattling off all those recruits, shouting out our entire scouting department, and asking for like buttons. I don't even know what I'm doing here today. We just need Steve to just take over the entire show. But I do appreciate you telling the people, because then that saves me a trip. But I'll go ahead and do it. Hit that like button if you've not already. We'd love to get to 100 likes. That's what it looks like, a big old thumbs up. Let's stick in the Pac-12. This is a really Pac-12 heavy show. This is just the beginning here. Let's talk USC, though. 5 official visitors this weekend, including a pair of 5 stars in edge Edric Houston and wide receiver Brian Wesco. So heading into the weekend, where do the Trojans sit with those two blue chippers?
Well, I think those are guys, they're obviously on the short list for both, but I think coming in, I would probably like the position of a few other schools. But we've seen Lincoln Riley make major moves with prospects. Once he gets them on campus, it's going to be an awesome vibe there, and an intimate vibe as USC just hosts a handful of their top targets. Let's start with Bryant Wesco out of the Lone Star State. He's going to take an official to Clemson June 2nd. Has trips to TCU and LSU also scheduled for the month of June. I think Oklahoma at one point set the bar in that recruitment, and I'm never sleeping on TCU and Malcolm Kelly and what they've done with the development of Quentin Johnston and players of that magnitude at TCU. But USC, that offense, Lincoln Riley's track record with receivers from the Lone Star State. Look, Lincoln Riley's trying to recruit that state as hard as he's trying to recruit the state of California. Wesco's another major target. We'll see what happens coming out of the official visits, because I could see that going a couple different ways. And then Edric Houston, look, he's battling Alabama. They're battling Clemson. They're battling Georgia. They're battling Ohio State. From that group, I would probably look at Alabama and Clemson, then Ohio State and Georgia, and then we'll see what happens with USC. But that's kind of my ideology on Edric Houston's recruitment right now going into the visit to USC. But he likes the Trojans. It's a big need for this program as they transition to the Big Ten and try and go from a team that was on the cusp of making college football playoff to winning a game or two in the college football playoff. They need a player like Edric Houston, and they're all in on him.
Steve, the Trojans will also welcome a couple players from the state of Texas, Miles Davis and Braylon Conley, and one of the better running backs out west, Christian Clark from the state of Arizona. How big is this opportunity for USC this weekend with those three out-of-state prospects?
Well, Miles Davis and Braylon Conley from the state of Texas again, and that's a place where USC's recruiting as much as any place in the country. Miles Davis is a guy that they've gotten in on a little bit later, but he's really clicked with Alex Grinch and is excited to get out to campus. He took recent visits to Texas and Texas A&M and made it up to Purdue to see Ryan Walters and company, my neck of the woods. But USC is obviously interested, going to take an official visit. We'll see what kind of tone that sets in this recruitment moving forward. He's very excited. And then Braylon Conley. I think USC's in a very interesting position for him. Arkansas is certainly high on his list. He's going to take an official visit there. He's going to go to Auburn, Utah, and Washington. So a lot of Pac-12 flavor in Braylon Conley's recruitment, and he's excited to get up to USC. And he talked about the education excellence of USC along with their great football history. So he likes the total package. And then Blair, Christian Clark, a little bit of new news here. I'm not expecting them to make that visit now. I heard that visit is now not going to happen. So we're down to 4 official visits for USC this weekend. I think you look at 2 running backs that USC's in the thick of it for right now. Taylor Tatum, who our scouting department loves, and then Derek McFall, a speedy 4-star running back out of the Lone Star State. Gerard Martinez from our USC site told me that he thought that USC could be close to pulling the trigger on him. Those are 2 backs to keep an eye on, I think, moving forward for USC. They already have the battering ram, 240-pound Brian Jackson from Texas in the fold. He went for over 1,600 yards and 23 touchdowns. Who's going to run alongside him in this class? Taylor Tatum, who has an official the first weekend of June, is a possibility. Maybe Derek McFall, as Martinez said. But right now, Christian Clark not expected at USC this weekend. We'll see what that means with those 2 moving forward.
All right, appreciate the clarification there. No Christian Clark potentially, a slightly smaller group in Southern California. We're going to switch gears a little bit here. IMG Academy holding a spring scrimmage last night. Our director of scouting, Andrew Ivins, he was there among the media masses and, of course, college coaches in attendance. So many were there to watch 5-star defensive lineman David Stone. So what did he say about his ongoing recruiting process, Steve?
Well, Andrew Ivins wrote a great story about that event. If you haven't seen it, get over to 24/7 Sports. He made you feel like you were there as he kind of depicted the atmosphere. And David Stone was the guy who was the alpha dog from the event, had some big sequences on the field, was a dominant player out there. And many of the college coaches that were there to see him. His recruitment is one where early on you liked Oklahoma. Then there was a time where it looked like Michigan State had some major momentum, but they've had some coaching changes. This spring, a few teams have been on the rise with him. Miami, where he visited 3 times, including most recently last weekend. Jason Taylor, Coach Salavea, Mario Cristobal. We've talked about this numerous times on this show. Miami signed the best offensive line class in America last year. They are all in on signing the best defensive line in the country this cycle. David Stone is one of the prospects that they're in great position for, along with his teammate Jaden Jackson. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes an official visit to Miami the second weekend of June. They're one of the teams on the rise. Florida's another team on the rise. He's loved his visits there, loves Coach Chaos. That's Sean Spencer, best nickname in college football coaching circles. He's got terrific pedigree from his time at Penn State, his time in the NFL. He likes Coach Napier, likes Coach Armstrong, likes that Florida staff. They're a team that's on the rise with him. And then Oregon is another program after a recent visit this spring. He loved his time out there in Eugene. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets back out there for an official visit at the end of June. And then one school that's been right there the whole time with Oklahoma, but maybe didn't get as much buzz for whatever reason, is Texas A&M, which he was back there this spring. They're one of the first powerhouse programs to offer him. He loves Coach Elijah Robinson and company, just loves being in College Station. And they're a program that should be talked about more in the David Stone sweepstakes.
Another top prospect that took part in the IMG Academy scrimmage was 4-star Jarrett Gibson. He's the #1 rated running back in this 2024 class. He also spoke with Andrew Ivins. What did he have to say about the latest in his recruitment?
Well, I think that this recruitment, you still have Texas as the team to beat going into the official visits, and they're going to get the last official visit in June. So it's up to Georgia, who's going to get an official visit the first weekend, I believe. And then you have Miami the second weekend. You have Tennessee in the thick of it. Those are the programs that are set for official visits. And then I'm never going to sleep on Florida in this recruitment. I think that Miami and Florida are the biggest challengers to Texas right now for Jarrett Gibson. He loves Tashard Choice, loves Coach Sarkisian, loves the cohesiveness of the Texas program, loves the running back history at Texas, loves what they just did with Bijan Robinson, loves the way that Texas staff makes him feel in Austin. So it's going to be tough to beat Texas. But Miami's on the rise. There's no program recruiting him harder. Tim Harris was at the spring game. We talked last time, we talked about Jarrett Gibson. We said he would be back one more time unofficially before he takes his official visit. Gabby Uridia from inside the UR Miami site says that he'll be back this weekend. So Miami is in an interesting position as they try and make a move there. And then Florida was first to offer him. He was committed to Florida very early, even though there was a time where he didn't even consider Florida in his lead group. They're now back in his lead group. He's been there several times. He just keeps popping up in Gainesville. It was the program we grew up rooting for. Coach Napier and company hanging in there for Jarrett Gibson. So I'm not discounting the Gators moving forward, but I like Texas right now. We'll see what happens.
All right, Steve, appreciate you keeping track of all of that as it continues to change. And thanks for being on this show. And thank you for asking for those likes. We do appreciate it.